Hello and good evening. Welcome to chapter number 3 of your syllabus, which is strategic analysis. What are we going to see under this chapter is the environment within which a business functions. It includes both internal and external environment. That means we are going to see the internal situation of the business, its heart, understanding its stomach, its brain, all the internal things, and understanding the environment in which the business operates. Until and unless these two aspects of any business are understood or analyzed, strategy cannot be created. Strategy cannot be built for any business to operate. So, strategic analysis, the chapter contents will majorly involve external analysis as well as internal analysis. Under external analysis, we have three major tools in your syllabus, that is PESTLE, then Porter's five forces, and Porter's diamond, which we are going to see in this chapter. Under the internal analysis tools, we are going to see strategic capabilities, then Porter's value chain and SWOT analysis. These are all internal analysis tools where we will analyze or we'll use the tools to analyze the internal structure or the internal systems of a business. What all things work in a business, how these are going to impact the strategies for the business. So that everything is there under internal analysis tools. And studying the macro level or studying the external environment, we are going to use these three of tools. So let's just begin with the external analysis tools first. One, the pestle analysis, one of the most important tool which is used practically by many companies. So with pestle analysis, every business, it wants to study its external environment, external macro environment in which it has to function. This knowledge is basic. I mean, we go to Shark Tank India and we see that every time the sharks or the investors have one view, understand the market first. Understand the market where you want to operate, where you want to prosper. This is somewhere linked with pestle analysis, that you first need to understand the macro environment in which the business has to function and prosper. So it has some aspects, the first being political environment. That means the environment in which the business has to function, how the government functions there, or the government under which the business has to operate. The policies made by the government, the tax regime of the government, then is government stable, or every time a new government comes into picture, because every time when new government comes in, their thought processes differ. One may say we welcome FDI, another government may say no FDI, everything make in India. So it can be anything. So that political aspect has to be understood clearly, what the government wants to do in the next coming years of its tenure, what policies it wants to imply, how strict it wants its imports to be taken up, what is the export status, how much disposable income is it leaving for its public, everything. So that political aspect has to be understood by every business to decide the strategies adopted to be taken for growth. Now, after political, the economic environment of the business also needs to be studied. The economic environment in which the business is operating. It will include the economy's stand. If the economy of the country is under boom or is under recession. So, for example, if I say that there is a country which is actually in big recession, the people of the country do not get something even to eat, no shelter, no clothes. In such a country, if you try to put up a fashion brand, it's going to be a disaster. That means you clearly need to understand the economic status of that country also. Coming next to it, the social factor, the social environment, sentiments of the people, the culture of the people, what are their likes, what are their dislikes, Then what is the demographic structure of the country, age groups for which you are targeting your product, the overall society, that is the social environment of every business. Or you need to decide if your product will fit in the social setup of that country. Coming next to it, technological. How technologically advanced the environment is. I mean, just imagine a business which wants big machines to give a big scale of production, but the country in which it wants to operate, that country has no mode to take the technology to the factory. There are no roads. Even importing the technology is not allowed by the government. Then how will that machine work happen in that country? So technological support, technological adaptability, if there are no people to operate that technology, that is another challenge for the business. That means technology support, from bringing in the technology, running it, then how fast it changes in a particular country, that also impacts the business decisions. If a country takes 10 years to come from PC to laptop, versus there is a country which takes 30 years to come from a PC to a laptop, that means technologically the second country is going very slow. The technological advancement is very slow in country 2. In that case, your product, its innovation, its change will not be appreciated by the people of that country. That means Apple launching a new phone every 1 year will not be a good product for that particular country, because that country is happy with PCs for 30 years. They don't need Apple iPhones every 1 year, every 6 months. So that's the technological advancement or acceptability or availability in a particular country. Then comes ecological or environmental situations of a country or the environment in which the business has to operate. The environmental rules. How strict are the environmental regulations? Environmental impact. So for some countries or some places, the environment is very critical for them to identify. If you come up and say we are putting up a factory of let's suppose plastic glasses, disposable glasses, it's not going to be welcomed by that country. But there can be a country which can say, okay, we don't know about it, no pollution by any disposable plastics, you come and put up the factory. That's the environmental concerns and rules related to that particular country, or which are prevalent or adopted in that country. So that you have to also see what is the environmental impact on that country, how that country takes it, what are the rules related to environment protection under that place where you want to operate. And then comes legal. What is the legal system there? If you start a product, there are some sanctions which you need to take. You need to get approval from some authorities. That is the legal system of any country, where you need to get the pre-research, where you need to actually think beforehand that what are the legal consequences if we fail in delivering the quality to the customer basically. So there are many countries where if any of the food items is found not fit for consumption, then the product can be banned forever. But there are many countries where the ban comes only for 1 month or 2 months, that too it is dissolved with some financial penalty. Don't want to highlight where this happens. So these are some 5 6 points where or by which the external macro environment of a business is studied, so that strategies can be taken up which suits the environment for the business and the business prospers. So the macro environment and your policies should go hand in hand. Now let's take a practical example on this. Let's take an example of Kisan, the sauce and jam which we love, everybody loves. So let's take a small example on this. Let's first come up on the political environment. So let's take something which is fictitious. When Kisan would have come to India or when would have started operations, it would have definitely thought of the political stability of India. How stable is the country? If the production of this product will be successful or not. So let's suppose this we are going to manufacture a jam and a tomato ketchup in the name Kisan. So that would have been the challenge at that time also. And even today, when we are thinking, we have to think how friendly is the government when we want to set up an industry which manufactures this. Is the government stable? What are the government policies related to our investment or industrialization? That is the political aspect of it. Now coming to the next part for Kisan, economic. Is the economy in such a phase that people actually want to eat jam? They want to have sauce in their plates? Or the situation is very bad that people are hardly getting any meal to even two meals in a day they are not getting. So under that situation they will not actually go for any jam or sauce. They'll be starving in a bad situation. So economic growth, and then the currency, how the economy is growing, what is the level of employment, what is the level of inflation in the country, everything will be considered by Kisan, by us, while launching the product. Then comes next the social factor. So jam is something which Kisan would have also researched that children are going to just love it. And sauce, it can be a replacement for chutney. So samosa is supported with sauce, and then some sandwiches supported with sauce. And recently we just could witness a pattern where parathas also were going with jams. This is the liking. So that social factor, Kisan would have also considered that, okay, Indian Janta, it needs a lot of sugar. It needs a lot of sweetness with its breakfast. They are not really considerate on how much sugar is there in the jam. How much sugar am I eating? They want chutneys and something sweet to eat, even with their breakfast or be it their lunch or dinner, whatever. Then comes your technological part. So manufacturing Kisan jam with automation, that becomes a question. Is the machinery available locally to manufacture this big quantity of jam in India? If not, will this machinery be allowed to be imported? We will get apt labor to support this production. Will the labor be skilled enough to handle that production? Once that production is done, will we be able to do proper packaging and then proper distribution channel? So everything. Does India support that? That's the question. Then coming next to it, environmental. So this Kisan Squeezo, this is one of the products which has got a plastic bottle. And now, considering the current environment and the awareness of people against plastic, this actually becomes crucial for us to understand if this type of plastic is promoted in India. Will people really love, or the sentiments of the people won't get hit by the use of plastic in a food item? So that has to be considered by the manufacturer. Maybe a glass bottle can be a better replacement. Even the pitchkus or even the refill packs for ketchup, they are made up of a material which may not get, they may be biodegradable, they may not be biodegradable. So that aspect has to be considered well by the company, so that the environmental protection laws, they do not just come up and grab you because you are violating the laws. How strict are the laws? What is the penalty actions against any manufacturer if the rules are not followed? What are the strength and sentiments of people who are fighting for the environment for a particular country? So everything that has to be considered under the environmental aspect of the business. Then comes the legal part. So when it comes to legal, I'll show you one thing. One authority which keeps an eye on the food sector, that's this FSSAI. This. So this is the authority which approves the quality of the eatable. What are the ingredients? Are these ingredients apt for eating? Ensuring that the ingredients do not harm human body to an extent which becomes dangerous or disastrous for the whole population which consumes these products. So FSSAI is one of them. There may be multiple such agencies or such authorities which may exist in any country. More the authorities, more difficult it becomes for a business to do jhol jhal. They have to ensure that the quality is delivered, because a lot of agencies, a lot of departments are keeping an eye on what you are manufacturing, what you are using as input. So that aspect becomes very crucial, and nowadays this has actually gained a lot of momentum on this. So pestle analysis we just saw with Kisan as an example. We manufacture, we own Kisan, and then we have to do the pestle analysis to understand what type of strategy will work in this case. Now let's come to Porter's 5 forces model. So Porter, he suggested that there are 5 forces which actually give you an assessment or give you an idea of how attractive a particular industry is going to be. So if I want to start a business in a particular industry, a particular line, Porter's 5 forces will tell me how attractive and what a wise decision I'm going to take by entering into that industry. So that attractiveness or Porter's 5 forces, this usually is adopted by the companies before entering that industry. Then a cautious call can be taken by them. So, his 5 forces, they suggest how you can gain profits if you enter into a particular industry. So the 5 factors which he suggested are: one, the buyer power, the power of the buyers which you are going to serve. So if I simply put this point, can these buyers decide the selling price, or you are going to hold monopoly? That's the power of the buyer. How powerful is the buyer? The buyer becomes more powerful when your product has got substitutes. When your product doesn't have substitutes, you are the only supplier of that product and the buyers love your product, then you are the king. Buyers, buyers' power gets reduced. I just bower. Oh, what was that? Buyer's power just gets reduced. If you are more powerful, your product is more powerful, and there are no substitutes. So the buyer has to prefer your product only. Then comes the second part, supplier power. So obviously, when you are making a product, you need some inputs also. These inputs have to come from somewhere. This input comes from a supplier. Now, how powerful is that supplier? That is also very crucial for you to understand. How? Can he charge whatever he want? Because he can be the single supplier of the raw material. Oh, then that is something you need to consider. If there are multiple suppliers, then obviously he is not that powerful. If he wants any unshunt price, I will directly go to some other supplier. That means he has to ensure that what he is charging is not charged by someone else, so that he gets the business. But when he is the single supplier, then he will actually quote you whatever he wants. That is the supplier power. He can stop the supply. He can stop doing business with you. He can quote any price which he wants. He can give you the quality which is not usable for you as per your standards. Whatever can happen. But this will happen when there are not too many suppliers. When there are many suppliers of the raw material, then this situation doesn't arise. So before entering into any industry, see the supplier power also, how powerful they are. Then coming on the third part, competitive rivalry. How deep the competitive rivalry exists. Is there cutthroat competition in the market? So the past will give you an example on this. There is one particular product in the market which you want to enter, And previous year, last, or let's say 2 years back, one of the manufacturers entered the industry, and he was just bashed by the competitors like anything. The competitors did everything to take him off, to throw him out of the market. If that's the situation, then think twice. How strong are your competitors? If your competitors are extremely strong and you cannot fight against them, then take a cautious call. But if your competitors are not as strong as you, then the path is very smooth. Then you can take a call. Coming on the fourth part, new entrants. How many new people is it easy for them to come in that industry? So there are certain sectors where new entrants can enter very easily. That means the entry and exit in those particular markets or that particular product industry is very easy. But there are some other products where new entrants cannot come that easily. For example, petrol. Indian Oil, Bharat Petroleum, you won't find many players in this. But when it comes to glucose biscuits, when it comes to soaps, there are many players in the market, many players. So that's the difference between the product. How easily new entrants can enter the market. If it's very easy for anyone to enter, then you need to take a cautious call. Then you need to create a product which makes entry of newcomers difficult. If that you can do, then only think of coming into that market. But there may be a market where entry of new entrants or new companies coming in, it's very difficult. Then that's a good place to work. Then let's come to the fifth part, the substitutes. Your product can be substituted. So you have to analyze that also. The industry in which you are entering, can it be substituted very easily? Yes, there can be substitutes of everything. But managing that product with the same level of rigor which you are doing, is it easy for anyone else? So that substitute actually will become a problem for you. If somebody else comes up in the market and starts giving the same product at good services, good price, then you are in trouble. So you need to see creation of substitutes. And that is why soaps, glucose biscuits, they have a number of substitutes. Easy to make. There is no service like item that you have to serve. That's not there. But when it comes to electronic items, there is after sale service. There is quality of the product. If you talk about a music system, you will find Samsung, you will find Sony, JBL, you will find n number of items, companies who are offering home theaters or music systems. But then how are they differing? The quality of the product. So substitutes do exist, but exact substitute doesn't exist. The quality of the woofer, the sound effect, everything will differ in all these products. Their warranty period, their after sales service, their pricing. So they are not exact substitutes for each other. And that's why all of them are surviving. The same applies to cars. They are not absolute substitutes for each other. That's why you can find a number of big players in the car segment also. So these 5 factors, Porter said that whenever you are trying to enter into a market, always use these 5 factors to study if the market is apt for you to enter. You have to analyze the situation considering these 5 points. Let's go into more detail on this. There is one common saying which comes with Porter's 5 forces. That common saying is, the more powerful the forces are, the less attractive that industry becomes. Means buyers are very powerful, suppliers are very powerful, competitive rivalry is very much on the high side, substitute risk is very much there, new entrants can enter the market at any point of time. That means all these 5 factors are very powerful. So the more power they have, the less attractive that particular market is for you. If everything, that means all five becoming more powerful, that means everything is going to be against you. So you better stay away from that industry, you better stay away from that market, because these five forces, the more powerful they become, the less attractive that industry gets. So that you have to remember this common saying, this makes your answer attractive, you know. So that's the thing. Now let me just take you in more detail on threat of new entrants. So what happens is, there are some barriers to entry in a particular market. What if the barriers are not very strong? It's very easy for anyone to come up and start an industry there. So we need to understand these barriers of entry. When it is easy, that means anybody can come and start its business there. But barriers of entry, they try to stop easy entry of new businesses in the market. So let's take some examples on that. Barriers to entry, there can be economies of scale. There may be some businesses which are producing in such a big scale that it's not easy for someone else to come up and manufacture at such a low cost, because bigger scale production attracts large scale economies. So I'll take you a simple example of bread. So all of us, we someday or the other day have sandwiches made up of bread. We use breads for our breakfast also. Do we ever think of manufacturing bread, making bread? So there is a simple reason. One, for our household, we do not need this much scale. We do not need this much quantity. Number two, the equipment which is needed, that's quite costly. That means if we still try to make, okay, one packet of bread we daily consume, why don't we start making it in house? So let's buy a bigger machine with which we will manufacture our one packet of bread daily. That will become very costly. It won't be cost effective. Certain items are cost effective because they are produced in bigger chunks, because they are produced in bigger lots. So there also we will fail. So that's a common thing. Many businesses, they excel because of large scale economies which they get. Then number two, product differentiation. So sometimes because the products are differentiated, it's not very easy for someone to come up and enter that market. So this product differentiation, we can take an example of, okay, cars. Some cars have this much safety features that new entrants, they cannot actually compete with them. Or sometimes the comfort which are given by some of the hospitality sector players, the comfort which can be given by one hotel cannot be given by the competitor. That's product differentiation. That's although not a product, it's a service, but still it can be differentiated. Then third, the capital requirements. Some businesses require a lot of capital investment, and a lot of capital investment is not very easy for everyone to gain. So that capital requirements is another hindrance or barrier to entry in a particular industry. Then switching costs. Switching from one industry to another industry. Sometimes taking an exit from one industry and entering into another, that is a very costly affair. Many players cannot afford that. Closing one particular company and then opening something new, that switching cost is sometimes very high. Then access to distribution channels. So home delivery can work for one particular range of kilometers. For example, I want to eat a dosa. So Swiggy, Zomato can get me a dosa. But what if Swiggy, Zomato have to travel 2 hours to deliver me the dosa? Will that dosa be eatable? Not at all. So distribution channel should be that they can come up and deliver on time, in perfect quality, in perfect quantity. If the Zomato office or the Zomato service provider or the restaurant is too far from my place, then the distribution channel will actually kill that sale. So ice cream delivery, I could see that. The distribution channel, when initially Zomato and Swiggy started, they were delivering the food items. Once we got a chance to order ice cream, and I was wondering how will he get the ice cream? And it was amazing to see that he carried a box, ice box, and the ice cream was there. So even if it is a long travel, even if he stuck in traffic jam, the ice cream which he got was intact, although not completely intact, but 50% was still okay. So that's the distribution channel. There may be some production units which are located too far off in villages in rural areas that getting the production from there becomes difficulty. That is another hindrance to distribution channel. Just imagine a unit located in a hilly area. There you do not find railway connectivity. There you may not find roads also. Now how will you bring your production out for distribution? So that can be another challenge. Putting up an industry at a place where the distribution channels do not exist, that can act as a barrier to entry for many companies. Then comes cost advantage of existing producers. So existing producers may have tie-ups with the suppliers, with the retailers, or with their customers because they have a cost advantage because they have been producing since years. So that can be another point of barrier of entry for many newcomers. Then comes know-how. Some people carry the know-how with them. For the new entrants, that can be a dark spot. They may not be knowing the exact process with which a particular business has to be taken up. That know-how is very essential. That simply, if I am an old player of a particular industry, I know how things work here. I know how this situation or this product manufacturing problem has to be handled. This know-how may not exist with any newcomer. So that can be my Excel point, not MS Excel. The point at which I may excel. Something good for me. Then comes the regulation. So sometimes regulations also do not allow new entries. There may be a situation where you want to set up a factory, you want to set up a manufacturing unit in any of the foreign countries, but that country doesn't allow you to do that because you are not a resident or you do not belong to that country. They may reserve some of these sectors for indigenous producers only. We have some industries in India also where we do not allow foreign entities to enter here. Handicraft, for example, handicraft where we have artisans who have the skill set in India, that we are still not promoting to get into machine made thing. So it is there with Indian artisans only. We are not manufacturing them through machines. It's still sold handmade. So let's just throw some additional light on threat of substitute products. So substitute products, basically, if any of the customer finds a substitute product for your product, then the industry attractiveness again goes away, evaporates. So Porter clearly says substitutes limit the potential returns. Obviously, why will a customer buy my product if he has a substitute available in the market? Why will he give me better pricing if the product has got a substitute? The customer will go and buy the substitute if that is at a reasonable price and mine is at a premium price. So that's a clear statement. It puts this substitute availability puts a ceiling on the price which the firms in the industry can charge. So clearly, if my product has a substitute in the market, I cannot charge anything which I want. I have to put up a ceiling on price, that my price should not exceed this much level. Because if it exceeds this level, the customer will shift to the substitute product. Any example on that? There are many examples. There can be perfumes, there can be deo sprays, Then there can be wines. Although wines is something which relates to luxury, so maybe people do not look for substitutes. But yes, tea, coffee can be substitutes. If someone feels, okay, I have coffee, but now I'm in financial trouble, I cannot drink and afford coffee now, so let me replace it with tea. That can be a case. Okay, then the better the price performance alternative offered by substitutes, the more readily will the customer shift. Yes, if an alternative is available for the customer against my product and the performance is also fine, then the customer will immediately shift to that product. So the substitute will take my place. So that is a big threat. So now let's just see this Porter's five forces model under the food delivery partners with food delivery partner study. So let's take it under the practical grounds. I'll show you who these food delivery partners are. Zomato. So back in 2008, Zomato, it became the first app in India where food delivery started happening at your own place. Although this food delivery was order anything and you get at home, any food. Before this, Domino's had started, but Domino's was under a model that I will make my own pizza and I will deliver you my pizza only. So that was something of food coming in, but that food used to be made by Domino's only. But Zomato changed the whole scenario. You want to eat from Haldiram's? We deliver you. You want to eat from Bikaner Wala? We deliver you. Any place will get you that food item which you want. So the pioneer was Zomato, 2008. So now let's just see Zomato's journey and research considering the five forces model. Now let's suppose we are Zomato. So we have to see the buyer power. How powerful is the buyer? Can the buyer decide on pricing? Can the buyer decide on, no, I will not take anything from Zomato? So with them, the buyer was not really powerful. Rather, buyer was in dire need that I want food at home. And especially they prospered when the lockdown happened during the COVID times. So they prospered a lot. So buyer power was not that enough strong that they could beat Zomato. So Zomato was okay with buyer power. Then coming next to supplier power. Okay. So with supplier power, who is the supplier? For Zomato, the supplier is the restaurants. They collect the food from the restaurants and deliver it to the customer. But what if the restaurants stop doing business with them? Recently, some time back, rather, I should not say recently, it's an article of 2022. The Hindu's article, this is. So the restaurants, they wanted to shift their business from Zomato and Swiggy. And this news, this although relates to Domino's particularly, but it was a big news with all the chain of restaurants also. Their revenue sharing model or their terms and conditions amongst themselves, it came into some argument, and then they wanted to separate out their business from Zomato and Swiggy. Google out and search, you will find that. So that's the supplier power. At that point of time, yes, the suppliers for Zomato, that means the restaurant owners, they were powerful enough that they could actually halt the business of Zomato and Swiggy. But then something happened and then they re-collaborated and then things again went on place. So everything was fine. Then comes competitive rivalry. There comes Swiggy. But competitive rivalry, was it cutthroat amongst both of them? Not really. Not really. So it was not cutthroat competition. They were not just dying to be there in business. It was not just like that. But yes, a new entrant came into picture. A new entrant was there, and the new entrant was successful enough to survive along with Zomato. But the competitive rivalry was not cutthroat level of rivalry. So it was a balanced one that, okay, they will act as rivals, they will act in competition, but things were still okay. Apart from Swiggy, a new entrant further came, Uber Eats. So with Uber Eats, what happened was Uber Eats could take up some business as a new entrant for some point of time, but they could not survive for a longer period. They discontinued their Uber Eats after some time. So at present, we have Zomato and Swiggy who are into competitive rivalry, but exactly not cutthroat rivalry. Then comes the substitutes. Now, do we have any substitute for Zomato and Swiggy? Really not. But we have one more player, rather many, Blinkit can be one of them, Milk Basket, Big Basket. They are there, but they have a different setup. So, not exactly substitutes. I just wanted to highlight they are substitutes, but with a difference. So, there is no exact substitute with what Zomato and Swiggy are doing. Zepto, Blinkit, Big Basket, Milk Basket, they are all delivery partners, but with different setups. So that different setups makes actually, they do not make them complete and exact substitutes. So they're not exact substitutes. And that's why, because they are differentiated, they all are prospering. They all are existing. If exact substitute would have been there, then you need to add on something which differentiates you. Zepto has done that. Milk Basket, Big Basket, they have differentiated their delivery systems, and that is why they are existing. If exact substitute comes in, then the existence comes into question mark. That happens. Now let's come to scenario planning. So what is this scenario planning? Now, when now we have seen what are the environmental factors which are there with the business, some planning has to be done. That scenario planning has to be done, because if some changes happen in the future and you are absolutely clueless about them, then your strategy can actually backfire you. So better you plan the change. If you can see it today, you can plan for that change. So currently at this point of time, you need to identify if any change is going to happen, and then plan and protect the whole business from getting impacted. So for example, you already know that 2000 notes are going to be banned. Then you will do something, you'll plan out something that businesses also do. If the businesses get to know that because some COVID cases are increasing in one of the countries in the world, the travel sector can get impacted, they will immediately reduce down the number of flights, or they may increase the number of flights so that people at least start traveling fast. That can happen both ways. The strategy depends on how they want to take it up. Because when the lockdown was there, not all flights were functional, because the airlines was clearly knowing this, that people won't be traveling much. So why to run all the flights? It's better to reduce down the number of flights which fly from a particular distance to the second one. So that planning has to be done. And when you have a plan in hand, then it becomes easy for you to deal with even the worst situations. So that's the idea behind scenario planning. So there is an approach to scenario planning. You actually drag down or note down three scenarios. One, most likely scenario. Two, the best case scenario. And third, the worst case scenario. So I'll take up the first, most likely scenario, which has high possibility that this is going to happen. Most likely, where whatever you are predicting, whatever you are thinking, that actually happens. So majority of management's expectations, they happen. That's most likely scenario, that the chances are very high that what we are thinking, that is going to happen. Then scenario number two, best case scenario. Best case scenario, basically, not majority things will go as per our expectations, but even if it doesn't go as per our expectations, it is still going to be best for us. It's not going to damage us. That's the best case scenario. So whenever we just generally talk and we say no, definitely I'm going to pass in the exam, it's going to be a rank. That's the most likely scenario if you really get a rank. Now, best case scenario, when you start quoting, whatever happens, I'm any which way is not going to fail, and you get 54 marks. That means the reality turns out to be favorable in your case. You didn't get rank. So most likely scenario didn't happen. The best scenario didn't happen. But something which happened for you, it is favorable for you. The best I have done. So definitely I'm going to pass. That's best case scenario. But worst case scenario, what will happen? I will fail. What else will happen? Yeah, nobody's going to come and murder me. That's the worst case scenario. The worst which can happen. So maximum worst which can happen in giving the exam is you can fail. Nothing more than that will happen. Nobody's going to murder you. Nobody's going to debar you. Nobody is going to fire you from your job. Nobody's going to say, no, I'll not marry you because you could not clear your paper. So the worst case scenario is something which goes against you. And that against maximum has to be identified. So now let me just talk in respect to the businesses. So let's suppose for a business which has just entered into travel. So let's suppose I am into airlines business. We are into airlines business. So with the airlines business, what happens? Now we know that one country in the world is suffering from a disease which spreads very fast and people die with that disease. Now we think that majority countries will stop flights from that country to their countries. Coming from China to India, coming from China to US, coming from China to Australia. These other countries will stop the flights coming from China. The first step. That's the most likely scenario which they expect, that this is going to happen and our flights which are from China, we'll have to stop them. And that actually happens. They expected this to happen and that actually happened. But the best case scenario here would be, even if that happens, you will have to fly additional flights to take people home to China or to take people home from China to US. There may be US citizens living there, there may be Indian citizens living there. So you may have to fly additional flights to take them back home. That's the best case scenario, where the environmental factors, they move in the favorable direction for the organization. Worst case scenario, all the countries lock themselves. Even US and India, the passengers will not move from one country to another. That's the worst case scenario. All flights are stopped. Only one country was impacted. We thought our airlines are going to be impacted only from China to other countries, but it impacted the whole world. I mean, now from Australia to US also not happening. From Canada to India also not happening. That's the worst case scenario, which has happened for any of the airlines companies which we witnessed under the COVID times. So this scenario planning becomes very important, because until and unless you know what challenges are there in your way, how will you plan for them? And if you don't plan for them, then definitely unplanned business can anytime lead to big disaster. So scenario planning becomes very important for you. Now continuing with the remaining part of the chapter, that we'll do in the second part, the second session of this chapter. So we end it here. Till here, you have to do one exercise. You have to do some research on Google with more companies who have done their pestle analysis and Porter's 5 forces. That will give you a better understanding on how these models are really adopted by companies when they decide their business strategies. Where to enter, how to enter, and what particular steps need more attention. So do that homework. We'll catch up in the next session of this chapter, chapter number 3. Till the time, take care and keep on studying.